For my pottery, I use all wild clay that I collect and process myself. And after over 30 years of hunting down new clays and testing them, I've got some really good clay that I use. But I think I can do better. I think I can take that good clay and make it really great clay. So today I've come out here to the country to look for and collect some more clay that I can take back to my studio and mix and hopefully come up with something really great. So today, as I'm out here collecting clay, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the properties I'm looking for in that clay and how I plan to go about making this clay better than my usual clay. In the end, I hope to have a clay that's really great, that stands up with some of the greatest clays in the Southwest. And let's talk a little bit about that too, about some of the clays of the past that are really spectacular. This is one of my favorite clays in the Tucson area. This is the clay I'm most likely to bring to pottery workshops because it's great for beginner students. It has a lot of wet strength, which means you can form it into a shape and it's not going to slump or sag, and you can just keep building without leaving it to rest. So it's a great clay for workshops, it's a great clay for beginners. For me, it's a little too firm in that, especially when it dries a little bit, it's really hard to kind of scrape and shape and mold and sculpt. Because it's so firm, it takes a lot of work to kind of change that form. So I'm hoping to blend this with something a little softer to make it just the right amount of wet strength. This is one of the first clays I ever used when I moved to Tucson in about 2004. This was shown to me by a replicator friend of mine here in Tucson named John Guerin back then. And for many years I used this clay to make pottery. I used to take my pottery workshops out here to collect clay, which was always a big highlight for them. The trouble with this clay and why I stopped using it is it's lacking in wet strength. It has really great plasticity and it's soft and easily molded. But if you're making a large form or a tall form, it wants to slump. So you build a little while and then you have to wait for it to dry and then build a little more and wait. And it just lost out to other clays that had more wet strength. But now I'm thinking that a little bit of this blended with some of that clay with more wet strength might result in a really nice compromise on wet strength. Clay that is strong, but not too strong. Clay that is soft, but not too soft. Okay, so now I'm back in the studio with my clay. I've got almost a 5-gallon bucket full of this softer brown clay, and I've got almost a 5-gallon bucket full of this firmer red clay. The trick now is going to be to figure out what proportions to mix these at. So a good 50-50 mix might be a place to start, but I feel like a 50-50 mix might give the advantage to the firmer clay. I'm thinking of something closer to like a 60-40 mix, with the majority being this softer brown clay. Also, both of these clays take different proportions of temper. So this clay needs to be ground and mixed separately with the temper than this clay. So I'm going to grind and mix this with a 5-to-1 ratio, and I'm going to grind and mix this with a 4-to-1 ratio, and then I'm going to combine those two amounts of clay and temper together to hopefully create the perfect clay body. When we look at prehistoric Southwest pottery, much of it appears to be made with pretty cruddy clay. Really though, think about it. Without cars or horses, they were limited to clay sources that were relatively close to their villages. And sometimes the best clay in a local area is just not all that good. Often the pottery produced from these substandard clays is fairly crude. Sometimes they compensated that with wicked pottery making skills, and by covering up the clay with a smooth, brightly colored slip. I've found that the ancient villages archaeologists have identified as pottery producing centers are often located close to really good clay sources. But certain ancient pottery types really stand out from the rest. And when you look at this pottery up close, you will notice that the quality of their clay is much better than usual. In particular, I want to point out Hopi Yellowware Pottery and also Casas Grandes Ramos Polychrome Pottery. These two types are extremely well made, and part of the reason for that is that those potters had access to excellent quality clays. You can tell this by looking at those sherds up close, and by noticing that there is no visible temper. And because of that, these types were not slipped, because there was no need to cover up this beautiful, smooth body clay. The native pottery from near my home here in Tucson, Arizona is nothing like this. We don't have that quality of clay here. But I wonder if clay of this quality couldn't be created by blending different clays with different qualities and adding in some super fine temper. Now there's different kinds of temper you can use, but really one of the best tempers available is just recycled pottery. Old broken pottery sherds or pots that didn't come out so good from the firing, or you can even just fire clay without making it into a pot, just so you can grind it up and make temper out of it. I've got some old broken pots lying around that I'm just going to grind up, and then I'll screen them to make sure it's relatively fine. Okay, I've got my super clay all mixed up. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up in plastic and let it rest for a few hours before I test it, just to give it a fair chance to get as plastic as it can before I judge it. So I'll let that rest and I'll catch up with you in a little while. Okay, the clay's been sitting out here for several hours wrapped up in plastic. Let's open it up and see how it is. First of all, it feels real smooth. I like the texture of it. And it's got a fair amount of plasticity and a lot of wet strength as well. I think it's a little bit short. I don't think it's so short that I can't use it. Short means lacking in plasticity. But I think it's a little shorter than I expect or would like. But it may have more temper than it needs. So what I'll do is I'll make a little pot out of it. I'll let it dry, see how it does, fire it, see how it does. If it gets through that process okay, then I'll mix up some more with a little less temper and do that again and see how it does. And this way, I can keep testing the clay until I find out just the right level of temper I need. But overall, I think I've got a really good clay here. And if nothing else, it's a good start in finding a really great clay. If you'd like to learn more about the kind of tests you put a new clay through to find out how much temper to add, and those kind of things, you'll want to check out this video right over here, which is all about those testing procedures you want to go through when you find a new wild clay. Thanks for coming along with me today. I'll catch you next time.